Okay. Let's talk. Welcome in tonight. It is Letty Speaks, and I come to have discussion about things that matter, things that turn the heart, things that make sense, things that open up, thought and discussion as well. So I am becoming very interested in I'm starting to understand how important it is to share stories. The stories are the bridge between past, present, and future. They are the bridge between generations. They are the bridge between cultures as well. And so I look around and I find flowing in general population all kinds of stories from different traditions and different cultures, and I think it's cool. I think it's important, and I personally would like to hear more stories, even from my own culture. African stories, African folklore, African tales. I think it has a lot to offer me, us, everybody. It is very much a part of the fabric of our existence right now. And so since I feel like I want to see it and maybe there's not enough of it, then I also feel called to be a part of that change. And so one of the things that I've become interested in is storytelling, looking at different cultural points of views and perspectives. And so I bring that to my channel because I just think it's cool. And I think it's appropriate. And when I particularly read, these stories and folklore and tales, I get a lot out of it. It's entertaining, educational, many points of learning for me. I think it gives me a lot to ponder. It challenges some of the ways that I think as well. It also helps me to look back at lessons and experiences that I've had and things I've learned around subjects that, could be being presented in those stories that I can relate to. And so today I'm talking about a young girl from a certain African village who refused all suitors brought to her by her parents. Though all these suitors were very respectable, they were very decent young men who were being presented to her. And they presented themselves very well. And she still declined each and every one of them. So this caused her parents to be frustrated and discontented. They remonstrated in vain. That means they kind of protested against her declining all of these people that they're bringing. And it was difficult for them to get her to understand the importance of what it was that they were trying to do. And it made them frustrated. But with all of that, she just kind of shrugged and she said, I don't like the young men that you're bringing. They're all from our neighborhood. If one came from the distance, then I might look at them, right? So her parents left, and they just said, they shrugged their shoulders and said, I'm done for now. So what happens is she ended up staying single and unmarried for a pretty good amount of time. So one day, a handsome stranger arrived in her village and he presented himself to the girl's parents. He had all the right looks, all the right things to say, probably had a very handsome smile as well. But he presented himself very well mannered. And not only that, he had money. He was from money. He was wearing good cloth, as they would say, in this tradition. He even had ivory bracelets on his arms. He carried a gun and had a powder horn, which was curiously ornamented with brass wire. And so this guy was, as we would say in today's culture, the shiznits, right? He was a bit to do. So the maiden exclaimed on seeing this particular guy, "This is the one that I like," is what she said. So her father and her mother were a little bit doubtful, which was natural because no one knew anything about this guy. But in spite of all of their common sense, all she could say was that she insisted upon accepting him. He was, in fact, a hyena who had assumed human shape for the time being. So the usual marriage ceremonies took place, and the husband, in accordance with the Yao and the Nyanja custom, settled down in this village of his parent-in-law and made himself useful, with things like the garden, for the space of several months, things that a man would do to be helpful, So he stayed for quite a while. And then at the end of this time, he said that he had a great visit, but it's time for him to actually return to his own people and actually visit. And his wife, who he purposefully refrained from asking, begged him to let her accompany him as he went home to visit his people. So when all was ready for the journey, her little brother, who suffered from eye sores, I believe that means maybe he had weak eyes, or there was something going on with his eyes. He wanted to go too, but his sister, who was ashamed to be seen with him because of his eye condition, refused him sternly. She said, "No, I don't want you to go." But what he did instead was he waited till they had started, and then he followed behind, making sure that he stayed back just far enough so that he wouldn't be seen, at least until he was too far to be sent back home. And so they went on for many days and many nights, and then at last they arrived at the hyena's village, where the bride was duly welcomed, by her new husband's relatives. And she was assigned a hut to sleep in. But for her brother, to keep him out of the way, what she did is she sent him to the hen house, right? Again, she wanted to just keep him out of the way. But in the middle of the night, when she was asleep, the people of this village took their proper shape, right? They turned back into hyenas. And then they called together a group, right, by the husband. This group marched around the hut where the young lady was sleeping, and they chanted as they were marching around the hut, "Let us eat the game, but it's not fat yet. Let us eat the game, but it's not fat yet." So the little boy who was in the hen house was still awake, and he heard them marching and chanting. His worst fears were confirmed. And in the morning, he ran to his sister and told her what he had heard. But she didn't believe him because she was asleep. And so what he told her, he said, okay, tonight I want you to tie a string around your toe and let the string hang outside of your tent so I can get it. And so what he did is he drew that string back into the hen house that night. And when they began chanting and marching, he pulled the string to awaken his sister. She was now thoroughly frightened. So the next morning when he asked her, did you hear them, sister? She didn't have anything to say. So what the boy did is he went to his brother-in-law and asked him for a loan. He asked him to give him an axe and an adze. What an adze is, it's a tool, and I think I'm saying that right. It's a tool that's similar to an axe, only it has an arched blade at the right angle of the handle of this tool. And instead of just chopping, it's used for cutting or shaping large pieces of wood. So the man, as he appeared to be, who had no notion that he was detected and every reason to show himself good-natured, he obliged and consented to what the boy was asking. And he gave it to him and watched him go on about his way, into the bush somewhere. He was actually well pleased that the child would be able to, entertain himself and amuse himself and not really be bothered with him, So he was pretty amused by that. So later on, they soon found a cut down tree as the young boy needed. And they found him shaping it into what is called I think I'm going to say this word right, a newly. A newly is a kind of small boat. And when he had finished shaping this newly, he got into it and he began to sing. And when he began to sing, the newly began to rise up from the earth. And he went on singing, and it rose up higher and higher until it floated above the tops of the tallest trees. So the hyena villagers all rushed out to look and to gaze at this wonder. And the boy's sister came in as well. And then he sang, my boat come down, down, diddy, come down. And the boat floated gently down to the ground. The people were delighted, and they cried out to him, go up again, we want to see more. But he made some menial excuse for a short delay, and he managed to make his way over to his sister, where he whispered to her to get her bundle, which no doubt she already had, prepared and ready to go. And then she too climbed in as well to that boat. And when they were both safely stowed, he sang his first song again, and the boat rose with the verse as he sang. And he continued to sing, and it continued to rise. But this time, it did not come back down. And all of the spectators, after waiting in vain, began to suspect that their prey was getting away. Their prey was escaping. And they began to shout to the boy, come back down, bring the boat back down. But no attention was paid to them. And the newly quickly passed out of sight. So before the day was over, they found themselves actually above the courtyard of their own home. And at that point, the boy sang the words which caused them to descend and come back down, so that they aligned on their mother's grain mortar. Now the whole family came rushing out, overwhelmed with all kinds of questions and inquiries. The girl couldn't speak for crying with joy and relief. And her brother had to tell the whole story, winding up with, "Look here, sister, you thought I was no good because I have sore eyes, because I have weak eyes. But who was it that heard them singing at night? Let us eat her. And who was it that told you about it?" Right? The parents too, while praising the boy, they didn't fail to point out, the morale for the benefit of their foolish daughter, who some say had to remain unmarried until the end of her life. And so that is the story. And there was a few things that stood out to me about this story that definitely gave me some things to think about. The first thing that really stirred something in me is the character of the parents. I think it's a lost trait that we have today that is not seen a lot within our culture. And it's this sense of covering for this young girl and a sense of protection over her, right? I think that is becoming less and less in this day and time. The fact that there was the lack of understanding of what she had in her parents. Here they are doing everything that they can to procure a future for their daughter and to secure someone that they felt was worthy to give her the life that she was worthy of. And she failed to see that, which was unfortunate. But that stood out to me, and it's something that we don't see anymore. This covering for our children and this need to vet people that come in and offer to, align themselves with our seed, with our children. That was the first thing I think stood out to me, which was unfortunate that she didn't understand the value of what she had, right? In having parents that would oversee in that way. That was beautiful for me. And then the thing that really stood out about this was, why are we always in such a rush and so eager to pursue things that are outside of what we are? When we look in the mirror, do we like what we see? Is the question that came up as I was, reading and evaluating this story. There was something I feel like she didn't value herself as I was reading that story. And that was evident in the fact that she was trying to get as far away from herself as possible. Her rejection of her brother, her shame of being seen with her brother, was a reflection of her rejecting herself. It was almost like she wanted to get as far away from anything that resembled herself as possible. Her rejection of all the suitors that her parents thought would be good suitors and would be able to take care of her well, she rejected them because it reminded her of everything that she was and that she came from. Why is it that we are always so quick to pursue things that are outside of what we are? Like, do we like what we see in the mirror when we look in the mirror? Do we love what we see when we look in the mirror? It's not so much as, you going out and marrying a different culture, or you going out and marrying a different race. It's not the problem. It's the intention behind it. Why are you doing it? Is it because you're running away from yourself? And when you look in the mirror, you can't stand what you see, which means that when you look around, when you look at the person that birthed you into this world, do you hate what you see? When you look at your siblings, right? Do you hate what you see? Is that what's causing you to go out and pursue the furthest thing from yourself? That's dangerous. Because at the end of the day, you'll always end up coming right back to self. No matter how far you travel away from yourself, you always end up coming right back around to face yourself. That was the first thing that stood out for me. And it was really sad. It kind of saddened my heart to see that. And so that's a question that I wanted to pose. Do we like what we see when we look in the mirror? Because in order for you to actually secure solid relationships, it has to start within. It has to start with us. Or else we end up pouring all of ourselves out and we end up bankrupt because we have nothing left for ourselves. So all of that is a waste of time. It's a waste of effort. And we end up coming back to square zero to start all the way from the beginning. No matter how long it takes, at some point in time, you'll end up right back to square zero to start it all over again, right? The second thing that I drew from this was, and these are wise words from someone, my elder, right? My grandmother, who was very wise and very loving, very kind. She was the backbone of our family. And she would always tell us, she had lots of girls, and so, which was beautiful because, it was a matriarchal structure. And so there wasn't a lot of male leadership. And so, as women, we can definitely guide women easier than we can guide men. Not that it's not doable, but it's easier done. I think both females and males need both heads, male and female, to be healthy. But when it's all said and done, you find it a little bit easier to bring up someone in your own image as opposed to the opposite sex. There are things that you just can't teach a man as a woman, right? Nevertheless, she always told us to never be so quick to be taken away from your place of safety, to let someone pull you away from your home, from your support system, right? Grandma's hands, right? This is grandma's advice. And these are words that we're often given, but until you grow a little bit, until you experience a little bit, it doesn't really ring true. It doesn't really make a lot of sense until you have a little bit of experience, right? Sometimes it doesn't make sense until later on in life. But, she always told us as women to never, there was a lot of things she said, but one of them was never allow anyone to take you and pull you away from your support system. In other words, what she was saying is recognize where you are safe. In that place, that's where you stick close, because that's where your protection is. That's where your provision is. That's where your support is, right? If you allow someone to come and pull you away from that, you put yourself in a position of being vulnerable. You put yourself in a position of being abused. You put yourself in a position of even being vulnerable, abused, and even taken, for granted in many ways. And I understood what she means. I definitely understand that now more than ever. Because, and that, I'm not saying that every situation is that way. There are those who have, left home and went to start families, but in particular cultures, it's all about understanding and having people around, like this young lady did in this story. She had parents who were the gatekeepers, right? It's about having people who know how to gatekeep for protection, who are wise and discerning, and who can rightly discern character. And so, not to say that you should never leave and move away and start a family, but there's a way that you can do that. And her parents in this story, they tried to do that for her. Now, had she ended up with one of the young men that her parents had vetted, one of the young men that were very familiar because they grew up right there within that neighborhood in the same culture. They probably knew the parents very well. And so they probably even watched these young men grow up. So it was probably a lot like familial bonds there. And so had she connected with one of those young men and then decided to maybe move away somewhere and start their family, okay, well, he's vetted. I trust that he will do right by my daughter, right? So I don't have a problem with that. But it's all about not allowing yourself to be disconnected from that energy of wisdom, from that energy of covering and guidance that her parents was trying to provide for her. And so now more than ever, the words just ring clear that my grandmother told me, and it makes sense. And that's what this story brought up for me. Something that she would always tell us as young women. And there was lots of other things she told us too, and these are things that I hide deep in my heart. And these are things that guide me mentally because it's valuable. Rubies. They're rubies. Like rubies that I store on my bracelet, right? That remind me of who I am, of my responsibility as a woman, as a mother, as a sister, as an aunt, as a daughter, The third thing that stood out about the story that that stimulated thought was that there's the need to learn, going back to that energy of elders, there's a need to learn for young people how to value advice, how to value the covering that's been given. And my nose is itching, so I know I'm speaking some truth. How to value the protection that's being given by the elders that we have. And I know that's hard because, especially for certain cultures that have been dealing with a certain level of trauma for decades, and I mean decades, there has been certain events and things that have been poured into certain cultures that have completely knocked people off of their feet. And we're still trying to recover from those things. Unfortunately, it has been generations that have suffered as we've been trying to recover. Generations have suffered. And so there's been like this disconnect that's happened. There's been this trust that's been broken, where it once was, where we would be able to look at the people that are responsible in the way that this girl's parents were responsible for her. We should be able to look at our elders in that way and fully trust that they have our best interest at heart. And I know there has been an era of time where that has not been so. And we're still trying to come back from that. Nevertheless, there's still the need to value, because some people fell off, but not everybody did. Not everybody fell off. Because the value in having elders is that they can see what you don't. They've experienced what you've yet to experience. And they know what they're talking about, right? And so there is value. There are tons of treasure in the wisdom that is being shared, that needs to be shared, that is desired to be shared with young people, if only they would listen. Part of that is on us too, because we have to position ourselves in a position to be accountable in that way so that we can give that type of guidance, right? It's a two-way street. But elders are considered elders for a reason. It's because, they have earned the stripes. They've been vetted, right? They've earned the right to speak. And as the saying goes, only fools despise wisdom or correction, right? Only fools. But just like in this story, there needed to be a coming back home to self. And that eventually, thankfully, did happen, right? There's a coming back home to self and to realizing what it is that you had the whole time. Now, on the other side of that, the consequence of leaving yourself in that way is that sometimes you spend the rest of your life by yourself. In her case, that was, a consequence of the decision that she made. But, sometimes, and I say this with grace, there is no coming back home. Some people never find their way back home. Fortunately, there were things that took place that were destined to bring her back home, like her brother, who she didn't want anything to do with, who was also wise. It's interesting how this story played out because he was younger than her and yet had more insight and more wisdom than her. And I believe that was because of his connection and his reception to his parents, his elders, right? That's another thing. When you open and you connect and you provide space to allow the elders to pour into you and connect to you and to rear you, it actually causes you to actually grow quicker. It actually causes you to actually develop faster, right? Have you ever saw a young person that was raised by old people, and it's almost like an old young person, right? A person before their time, because there was some type of submission to someone old, right? It causes you to advance quicker. So her brother had more wisdom than she did, and he was younger than her. But had it not been for his level of wisdom and craftiness, right, she may have never returned home. Had he not gone, they would have never seen her again. And so there is a lesson to be learned in this story about being open and being allowing the elders to tap into you. There's value in that. Being receptive, that's the word I'm looking for, to the elders. They're elders for a reason. And so I wanted to share that story. That's one of the stories that I read that stuck out to me as a mom, right? I can't tell you, how I pray that my lessons will actually be things that I have actually paid the price for. Therefore, I can share that with my children so that they don't have to pay the price. I already did, right? I can't tell you how much as mothers we want to see our children do well. We want to see them thrive, not just survive. We want them to thrive. And we are willing to share our lessons. We're willing to give advice. We're willing to guard and to gatekeep, because we can see things that the young people can't. We can say things, that will stick with you for a lifetime. It may take a few decades for the light bulb to come in around that piece of wisdom, but it's always there. And we have a responsibility. We have a duty to say it and to do it. And so this was a beautiful story. I love this one. And so I just wanted to share that. If you are a storyteller or you're a listener, you're enjoying this, maybe something else about the story stuck out to you, feel free to share it. This is an open page, and I love interaction. And so with that being said, I'm going to shut this down. And so thank you for tuning in. More stories to come. All right, it's been Letty Speaks, bringing in a level of wisdom. That's what we need. We need more wisdom. All right, until next time, you guys, sweet dreams and take care of yourself. All right, love you. Bye.